40 minutes. Cool. So you guys, can you hear me? It's so odd. All I can hear is the other speaker. So, okay. So I'll watch for your facial expressions. So I'm excited to be here. It's my third time here. This is the fourth conference that Timo and Stefan have done, and this is my third time. And I just saw Timo earlier after a panel, and he seemed well rested compared to last year. He was very tired because I think it was hard to scale it from the second to the third, where they made it like almost twice as big. That being said, I'm here today to talk about creative leadership. I think I'm talking too fast, so I'll go slower. Nachher, du könntest gerne auf Deutsch eine Frage stellen, ich kenne ein bisschen Deutsch, das ist eigentlich kein Problem, aber ich kann kein Österreichisch oder Schweizerdeutsch. Eher Hochdeutsch, aber auch Ami-Deutsch. Yeah, so bleiben wir bei English, okay? Creative leadership. So let me just see a show of hands. How many of you consider yourself leaders in whatever you do? Okay, we can get that going higher. And so let's just get going. So when you think of leadership, what do you think about? And I don't mean in the term of leaders. You know, there's leaders and then there's leadership. So just think about that for a second. When you think of leadership, what do you think about? For me, a lot of things come to mind, and when I think of leadership, I try to think of three people that I find are quite influential in what I do and how I think today, to some degree, besides my family, of course. So, that being said, first I think everybody has the potential to be a leader, and I think at some point we all have the leadership qualities, but at some point our institutions, we kind of grow out of what a leader means. So if you look at these photos, you know, they're just pretty casual photos of some leaders that you might know, where they were at that point in time, maybe they weren't known as being leaders, but now they are really well known as leaders. So here we have, the first photo was, if you didn't recognize him, that's Barack Obama. The second photo is a little harder because there's more people, more. Does anyone know who the leader here is I'm thinking of? No, that's on the far left. That's Sheryl Sandberg with the bushy hair. She's the COO of Facebook now. And then the last one, this is maybe a little better quality. Anyone know which leader this is? Can you recognize? Yep, Elon Musk. And that's Elon Musk. So the question for me is, how do we understand what leadership is, and what is a great leader, and how do you become just, you know, being a kid, as these guys are, to become a leader as what they are now? So here's the reveal. You know, we have one, Barack Obama, hopefully still well liked here in comparison to my new president. Sheryl Sandberg, she's had an amazing career, and as you might have read, she lost her husband, and now she even wrote about that. And I think that is also leadership qualities, just sharing the sacrifice that she's had. And the last thing is Elon Musk. And that's also, you know, the things he's done has been pretty left of field. Nobody expected all the things that he's done. That being said, maybe you've seen this chart. You can just see if you guys have seen the chart. And this chart is something I show quite often, but the biggest disruption, the biggest thing that's causing all of the disruption we're seeing is this idea of exponential change. And it's best seen, maybe some speaker have shown this already, but basically if you think about our lives as humans, we live our lives in a linear fashion. So let's say I come over here and I take 10 steps this way, you know, it's linear, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm right here, and everything's cool. And as humans, that's how we live our lives, in a linear fashion. So if I take 10 more steps, I'll be at the end of the stage. And that's how we all understand our world. The challenge with that is, when it comes to technology, is the fact that technology is first, it's shit for the most part. It's a big disappointment, right? If you think the first mobile phone, it was like this big brick, and it kind of sucked. I have had a 3D printer for, I think, 6 years now, and the thing is like, it's having like an old-timer car. You know, it's you know, you have to constantly work on it. The results are just it's not what it lives up to be at first. But then all of a sudden, with technology, it just kind of explodes, right? Then all of a sudden it's like, what, WTF, you know, what the fuck happened? You know, all of a sudden 3D printers are these things where you can print houses, you can print can print jewelry. They're printing body parts, so you can print an ear. They're printing all sorts of different things. And that is the biggest challenge we have today. And this is this chart, you'll see this a lot maybe, is this idea of exponential change. And that's, as we as humans, it's really hard to understand that. And the only way to understand that is actually be a part of it. So whenever new tech comes along, whether it's the car, whether it's 3D printing, whether it's whatever it might be, nanotechnology, AI, most people dismiss it because it does feel like a big disappointment. But then it just takes off and everybody's like scared. So I show this chart as well because I think leadership also has to do with your personal values, but also the company you work for, if you work at a company. And really it's about having a purpose in life. And it's not just about forecasting the next quarter if you're in sales or winning awards if you're in advertising. It's really the thing that drives you as an individual and also drives the company. At my time at Google, I was at Google the past 4 years, I visited and worked with a lot of companies, and I'm surprised at how many companies did not have a mission statement or purpose. And I'm surprised at it because actually that's what drives a lot of people to work in places. So this is my personal mission statement, and since leaving Google at the end of December of this year, I worked with companies, I'm proud to say I work with companies like Porsche right now and Nike, two companies I admire quite a bit, and a little bit with Adidas. So I think it's really important, my point here is, as individuals, try to figure out what your purpose is, whatever it might be, and let that drive you. It does, it's not your day-to-day, but it's what makes you move forward. Because in the end, this is also something I show quite often, is people think technology is the big barrier to everything. It's like, oh, technology is so expensive, it's so difficult, we can't do anything because the IT guys, don't allow us, or everything's going to be better if we work in an office, if we get an internet and we can use Slack or whatever it might be. But it's really not the tech. If something doesn't work, if an organization doesn't work, some tech is not going to help that. You have to go deeper. So this is my thing I show a lot, and it's really, tech is not the limiting factor. It's not holding people back. It's the people in an organization that are not used to questioning why they do things. And that's where leadership starts with, is actually being able to question, is this something that makes sense? Can we do this better? Can we work with other people than just whoever might be? So questioning is really hard. And if you work in an organization, you've probably encountered this, where you're trying to do something, and then someone just says, that sounds like a great idea, but we've always done it this way. So why should we change? It just works. And that happens a lot. In other words, this is a little PR thing, but basically, I believe we have to ask questions like kids. If you think about kids a lot, they ask questions like, why is the sky blue? How are people made? Why do you have to go to Graz for the weekend? Things like that. So it's asking questions like kids, but it's not being it's having this sense of curiosity and not being scared to question things, but it's not acting like a child. And acting like a child is something like this. So it's more questioning and less acting like a child. So that's the difference. More questions, but don't act like a little tyrant. Don't act like a Trump, basically. Okay, I'm going to cover 3 things today, and it's going to be pretty rapid, and kind of rapid, but it's almost the end of the day, so I'm not going to go too deep in this stuff. But if you guys, like I said, if you have questions afterwards, das könnt ihr gerne machen. Frag mir ein paar Sachen da. So creative confidence, critical thinking, and collaboration. Those are the 3 things. These 3 things are the things that make, I believe, creative leaders and leadership. So let's just get into it right now. Number 1, creative confidence. And what does that mean? And for a lot of people, when someone says, oh yeah, I feel creative, or this person is so creative, a lot of times we associate that with someone that can be artistically creative. Yeah, they're such good at drawing, or they're so creative with the way they set up their room, or whatever it might be. But actually, creativity is a skill that we all have as children that we kind of lose through the institutions. And let me just get into that a little bit more. So creative confidence defined is this notion of having big ideas. And I think a lot of us, as children, I have 2 children of my own, there's some big ideas that come out of there. And hopefully the parents can enable those ideas to come through. But it's having these big ideas, and it's also the ability to act on them. And that is not always easy, because I think we all have ideas. They might be not like huge, but we have ideas. But the people that succeed are typically the people that not only have these ideas, but really make these ideas happen. You see these time and time again. And I used to teach at a place called Miami Ad School, and we would come up with ideas, and then a few years later, my ex-students would email me, yeah, look, this idea, someone's done this idea, and I'm like, yeah, you should have gone and done it. And that's what I mean. It's great to have ideas, and ideas are very valuable, but in some cases, it's more important to execute on ideas. And if we take this context into your workspace, having ideas, a lot of us have ideas, but can you actually make those ideas happen within the structure and within the organization? That's the key to making it in big organizations, or any organizations. Oops, so that was a error on my slide, but basically, if you think about in 2006 and 2007, it said Goldman Sachs had the most profit ever, based on some really sketchy investments. And this is, you guys know this game, maybe it's Jenga, you just pull out these things and then the whole thing falls apart. And that's what happened basically. They were profitable, but it was the beginning of the financial meltdown. And in 2006, 2007, they were profitable, but then in 2008, when Obama was elected, he inherited a bunch of debt and depression and the housing crisis and the financial meltdown. Everybody has been working noses. So the result being something like this, when Goldman Sachs went almost bankrupt, they didn't. The sentiment was, you guys just jump, just forget, because a lot of people lost their housing, and a lot of people's lives were really torn apart. So that was the sentiment. And I think that is one of the reasons why Obama was elected, because he represented something that was totally different than the Bush era. And that's also a reason why Trump was elected, unfortunately, because people wanted a change, and Hillary did not represent the change that people wanted. But now they're second guessing their votes, as they should. So here's a little quote, and I think it goes to this idea of thinking big and actually executing big, and really, obviously when you're the president, you have a little bigger issues than if you work at a company like Bosch or Google or whatever it might be. But here, it really is, I think leadership is really about creating inspiration for people, inspiring people into action, and I think that's what really great leaders do, and leadership is really about that. So if you have a boss or a leader that you deal with, and they're not inspiring, then you kind of think, why am I here? So I think inspiration is a really big part of being a great leader. So in the end, there's another error. In the end, he left last year, and there were, it was the highest. The stocks were the highest ever. And there were the jobs were the lowest. They had the lowest unemployment when he left. So I think some things he didn't live up to, but for the most part he really helped out the country, and hopefully globally the world, financially and only socially as well. So yes, yes we can, yes we did. Another example of that is this idea of thinking big. This is 2007, January 2007. This guy comes up with the iPhone, which pretty much changed the way we interact and communicate with each other today, incredibly so. And it was also a big idea, because if you think about it, before the iPhone, there were a few smartphones, and Nokia, if you guys remember the Nokia was around, but their big OS at the time was Symbian, and that was based on smartphones. So here's a chart showing the OSs on different smartphones. So Symbian was actually the dominant player back in, first quarter 2007. And then iPhone shows up, and Apple starts taking more market share, and then it starts growing. And we all know what happens to Nokia. The story with Nokia is one where they didn't think big enough, whereas Apple did think big enough, and they were able to execute. So it's kind of a sad story, but I think it will help you understand what I'm trying to say, is you really have to think big. Doesn't mean you have to, and that's almost that's the pervading spirit also in Silicon Valley. Some people think, they're so full of themselves because they have such lofty goals, but I think you really have to think big. It doesn't mean you're going to execute on it right away, but to think big, like when JFK said we're going to go to the moon, some people believe we've been to the moon in the 60s, that was a big idea, and he had people following his idea, his thought. So this is the CEO of Nokia, And this is basically what happened, and this will happen to a lot of companies. You do everything right, and then you still lose. It's because they didn't think big enough. You hit everything okay, but in the end you still lose. And that's going to happen time and time again, also because of this idea of exponential technology and exponential change. So here's a really old guy, and this has to do with ideas and crazy ideas. And really, if you think about crazy ideas, there's 3 stages that they go through. First, everyone thinks it's just ridiculous, Oh, cars, we have horses, why do we need cars? A smartphone, that's crazy. We have the best feature phone, which is a Nokia or whatever. We don't need an iPhone or whatever. So first, almost every idea is like, it's dismissed. Secondly, people just oppose it. You see that with, let's say, electric cars. Elon Musk, Tesla, they try to sell cars directly to consumers, not using dealers. And in the US, they outlaw in some states. You cannot buy a Tesla because that's against the law. Same, you see a lot of opposition when something new comes around. And then the last thing comes up is, okay, yeah, it does make sense. Let's go ahead and accept it, and everybody's all cool with it. And these are the 3 stages. So usually when an idea comes along, then you first think crazy. So if you think, right now I also work in VC, venture capital, so I invest in startups. But if you think about all the companies that passed on Airbnb, just because the idea of having someone stay in your home is so crazy. But now Airbnb is a $1 billion valued company. It's crazy. But you have to take these bets. So how to fail, and I pretty much just mentioned this. First, everybody knows this. You fail because you make a plan and you don't meet your plan. Everybody can relate to that. Okay, I want to hit X, I want to sell X amount, or I want to build X amount. You plan and you just don't hit it. But the other way to fail, and this is the Nokia way to fail, is you hit your plan and your plan wasn't big enough. And this is where a lot of companies are going to really be hurting, because you reach every quarter, you do whatever you hit your plan, but in the end you keep falling back because someone else made bigger plans. And that's a sad story, but it's happening all the time. Or if we flip it to be more positive, is how to succeed, You hit your plan, basically, and then you make the plans that are big enough. An example of that is these guys, since Steve is no longer with us, is if you think about Apple, they had really ambitious plans, and they made most of their money in the last, 10 years, after the iPhone, through the iPhone. The question is, can they still innovate? But if you think about their market cap today, they are huge. They could buy Tesla, and they could buy Facebook, and they could buy all these companies. They're more valuable than, they're the most valuable company on the planet, actually. Valued at $800 billion, which is a crazy amount. They could buy probably the country of X. They could, that's how much they have, and they have so much cash. It's crazy. The question is, can they still innovate? When the visionary, when the leader is gone, the guy that had all the vision, in my opinion, Steve, can they still innovate? And that's what we're trying to figure out. People that have stocks are trying to figure out now, is Apple still innovative? So the second thing is critical thinking. And this is also something that we tend to dismiss, because in our era of smartphones, it's so easy just to look for an answer or just look something up and just not really think about things. I think that's something that Germany and Austria are really good at, is thinking, like really thinking stuff through. That's your up, but the disadvantage is sometimes we think too long on things. I think it's important to think, but it's more important to make and do things, and then think about what you made. So critical thinking is defined as this: being open-minded with alternative alternative systems of thought. And I think the best example of that, or the best company, is definitely Tesla. If you think about, I mentioned this before, if you think about Elon Musk, the guy made millions with PayPal, and then he wants to start a car company, American car company. He has no car experience. Most people would say this guy is crazy, dismiss him. Or you want to do rockets, now you want to do rockets, it's crazy. But I think the way he operates is fundamentally different than most people. One thing, he doesn't have the baggage that a lot of companies have. So if you're a company like VW or BMW, you have a lot of baggage. So if you really wanted to work on electric cars, you really can't, because your full stack, the technology you use, which is fossil fuel, burning fuel, is basically, you're dependent upon that, and you're going to lose a lot of value if you move to electric. So, that being said, let's look at the Tesla Model 3. They came out with 400,000 pre-orders. You could go, when it was like the iPhone basically. They announced it, you can go to their shop, you wait in line like these guys, and you couldn't put a pre-order in. And the pre-order means you put $1,000 down, and then you get your car maybe in 2017 or 2018. What's interesting with this is a friend of mine, he's in California, he went there and put his, he was there, he had to fill out the stuff, he was talking to a representative, a sales rep, and then the sales rep asked him, so how many? And he said, how many? What do you mean, how many what? She said, how many how many cars do you want to order? And he's like, oh, I didn't really think about it, but they limited it like the iPhone, so you could pre-order a maximum of 2. But my point there is, these new companies have a totally different way of thinking. When you typically go into a dealer, you don't go in thinking you're going to order 2 of whatever it might be. You're just worried about ordering 1 car and maybe getting a good deal. Whereas Tesla, they cap it. They have to cap it at 2 because so many people were interested in it. And that just totally flips, it reframes the problem. I think that's interesting in itself. This might be a little hard to read, but some people say Tesla's not so successful because each car they sell is, they actually lose money on it. But if you follow every tech company, Amazon didn't make profit for until the last 3 years or last 3 quarters actually. What they do is they take the money, instead of giving it to the shareholders, they reinvest it back into the company. So one could argue if Tesla is successful or not. I would say they are successful because if you look at their mission statement, it's basically about creating sustainable transportation in the future, and they're moving that way. They're not successful maybe if it means about making 10,000 on each car. But the other question is how many, if we look at the numbers of cars being sold, it's actually declining. So I would argue, mobility in general is up for grabs. And I think Tesla, what's interesting is Tesla, some outsider, is able to set the agenda for the whole industry. And same with Google with self-driving cars. It's also a tech company setting the agenda. So this is a really short video of Elon Musk talking about how he operates. And it comes from the principle of physics. It's called first principles. And the idea being, which he'll explain probably better than I do, but the idea being is you do not work from analogies. You work from everything you know to be true, the basic truths, and then you build based upon that.
First principles is kind of a physics way of looking at the world. And what that really means is you kind of boil things down to the most fundamental truths.
Did you guys get that a little bit? So it's not based on, okay, like I said in the beginning, it's not like, okay, we want to build electric cars. How did we do them last year? It's more like, we want to build electric cars. What do we have available now, and how can we make it happen? And it's fundamentally different. And he does that for almost every company he starts. So an example of that is, you might have seen this video, it's called The Boring Company. And a lot of his ideas are just ideas. Almost all of them are just ideas. So he first gets people inspired, and then people actually work on them. So let me play this video. So the basic principle being, he was in traffic in LA once, and he said, oh, this traffic sucks. How can we get rid of this traffic? So the idea, which also sounds quite crazy, is you drive, and then you go, the elevator brings you down, and then there's tunnels under the city. And then the tunnels move you along to where you want to go. It's almost like having the Carrera bond, it's almost like having a thing. But that's basically the idea, how do you get rid of congestion? How do you get rid of stau, or traffic jams? And it goes really fast, of course. And there's a lot of them, and this is all underground, so you don't have to deal with all the visual thing. And then it pops you back up to wherever you want to be. So I think it's a compelling idea, and it's just an idea, but what he does is he works, like I said, he works with the idea of basic principles. So if we just break it down to 3 things, this idea, the Boring Company, B-O-R-I-N-G, not boring like sleeping boring, is basically you dig a smaller tunnel, so you don't need super big tunnels. You know, in Austria, I guess in Switzerland and stuff, we have these big tunnels we go through, and you have to dig them pretty big because, you know, they're for trucks and all different cars. So in this case, you dig smaller tunnels. Sounds pretty basic, but that's what he calculated. 2, you have to speed up the process of digging these tunnels by reinforcing and tunneling at the same time. So that's the second truth. And the third truth is drill faster. Really basic principles, but it makes sense. And people that have studied this believe it makes sense. Obviously, there's a lot of other implications, but in general, the idea is sound, and you could definitely innovate on this idea. So the last thing is collaboration. And I think that's something that we all can relate to. You know, either it works well when you work with people, or it doesn't work well, or it's something that you work on. You know, over time, hopefully that works. You know, it works. But I think really it's about 2 things. It's about having questions and having answers, and connecting those 2 things. There's a question and there's an answer. So for me, the question is, it's really about art. It's about the humanities. It's about asking questions, and that's what we as humans do well. And I think that's what we have to do better, is try to understand what are the questions we're really interested in. And for me, answers is technology. So you have a question, that's the human element in my opinion, and then on the other side you have the answer, which is the tech. It's the answer, it's the engineering thing. But when you put those 2 together, you get what I call magic, of course, and you see that with an iPhone or anything that just seems like it was meant to be. 2 things that were put together, it just works. And I think that is really, it's about questions. Art is always about questions, in my opinion. Tech is always about the answers. And those 2 will always work together, if they work together. So to break this down a little bit further, I think right now we're in this era called the experience economy. And what that means is it's no longer just about products and doing things. I think most of us want a really great experience, you know, an experience that changes over time. So we're shifting from the commodity to an experience. I'm just going to buzz through this really quick. You guys know what a commodity is, goods. Commodity are shoes. You know, if you think about Nikes versus Adidas, it's a commodity. Services, we see a lot more platforms and things. And then the experience, something that really lasts long. And that experience can be small. It can be a good experience or a bad experience. So if you shop at, for example, at Karstadt in Germany on the weekend, you get your product, you go to the Kassa, the cash register, and there's like 10 people in front of you. That's not the best experience. The other experience, you go to the Apple store, for example, and someone can just check you out right where the product is. You could try everything out. Really simple. And it's an experience. So what that means is the way we buy is changing, and it's changing forever. You know, we have different expectations based on technology and based on new behaviors based on this technology. So number 1, customization. We all expect some form of customization. We don't always get it, but best case scenario, it's offered. 2, we want outcomes and not just some general blah, blah, blah. And the last one is probably the most important. When you have a relationship or you have an experience, you want it to improve over time. Just like if you're with someone else, you know, a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or whatever, a friend, whatever it might be, when you have a relationship, hopefully that will improve over time. And then that's why you stay with people, because it improves over time. And that's the same for our relationships with brands or with tech or services or whatever it might be. That being said, everything, you know, every industry we think about, it's changing radically. I think I was just at a panel earlier today, and one of the guys, Marcus, does manufacturing. And you've probably heard this term manufacturing 4.0 or IoT, and that's going to change as well. So every industry you can think about is going through changes, and that's tough for a lot of people. Media already got hit. You know, there's publishing already got the wave, but everything is going to be touched by this transformation. The result also being companies that cannot change, cannot adapt, they're going to disappear, and it's becoming quicker and quicker, the companies that disappear. So in 1955, companies were around for an average of 75 years. You might have seen this. And then in just a couple years ago, the average life is 15 years. So companies are being brought up quicker and then disappearing quicker. Who's killing it? Who's making it? You know, the companies that really understand and experience is really important. So Amazon, Google, Apple, Facebook, you know, all the players that a lot of European companies are scared of because they have so much data, I guess. Who else is killing it? I think Tesla, Spotify, Box, Airbnb. You know, these are companies that are just fundamentally different. They just do things differently. They have a totally different business model, and they just say, okay, we want to use basic principles to do something, whatever it might be. So what's the common thread? And you might have figured this out. It's really about having a really great experience. And I think companies that are really focused on people, at the level of empathy, really understanding people, having the feeling for them, I think they'll do well. And that means three things. One, empathy. You know, these companies understand the user is everything, or the customer. Two, emotion. You know, we want more than just some utility. We want to have some emotion, some emotional connection to it. And the last one is this idea of seamless. So seamless means basically when you, I don't know if you guys have Uber here, but an example is when you use Uber, you can see the car, you order a car, you see it, and then when you get out of the car, you don't have to pay because they already have your credit card. You don't have to swipe like on My Taxi in Germany. You don't have to do the cash or anything. You just get out. So what that means, seamless, is having less speed bumps for the consumer, for you as people, to do whatever you want to do. Hard to do, but it's really important. That also means if you work in an institution or an organization, you have to fundamentally change how you do things. You know, you have to change the DNA, and it has to be things have to be approached a little bit more creatively. And I don't mean like painting pictures and stuff, it's just the way you approach things. So if you think about ideas in companies, first, companies are started by it because they have an idea. The second thing is they have the talent. So first you have an idea, second thing is you have to get the talent to help you realize your idea. And then third, you have capabilities. But the problem is, if a company wants to pivot or if they want to change to what they're doing, at some point, you can retrain your people, you can change the talent, and sometimes that works, but sometimes people don't want to change, so it's hard to make your idea happen. And then what follows is, basically, if you can change the talent or attract new talent, then you'll have different capabilities. But I think a lot of companies struggle with this idea of pivot. If you think about IBM, for example, they started with personal computers, now they moved a little bit to AI, so it's almost like it's a different thing. Or Google is a better example. Google makes all of their money, 88%, with AdWords. AdWords is based on the desktop principle, and now everything is moving towards mobile and mobility and pervasive, which means how they're trying to figure out how can we make money in the future. And now they're gunning for AI, so artificial intelligence. So like I said, it's really not the tech. Tech is the easy bit. It's really, what's hard is getting people to question things. So this is my second to last slide. So do you want to be a manager or a leader? And there's different ways to think about this. So leaders that a lot of us know are authority, symbols of authority. So it's, like, boom, I've got the whip, I've got the Peitsche, right, in German, and I'm the leader. It's more sticks. That means, there's more ways to punish people or to get them in order. It's about hierarchy. It's plan and execute. I mentioned that, you plan something, like, you plan for a couple months or 6 months, and then you execute it, and you hope you reach your plan. It's yes or no. Can I do this? Yes. Can I do that? No. And the last thing, it's leaders in this style are concerned with being right, and it's hard to be right when things are changing so quickly. I think creative leaders are fundamentally different, and I think a lot of companies that I mentioned today, they have creative leaders on board with them. So it's inspiring people. That's super important. Instead of pushing people, it's more like how can you pull people into your vision. It's more carrots, which basically, if you think about the donkey, that's the analogy for a donkey. What are some ways you can get people excited about things without having to use a stick to get them to move forward? What are the carrots? It's being networked instead of having a hierarchy. Creating your hierarchy. Your network is important. It's iterate and do, this idea of, okay, I'm going to create something, I'm going to put it out in the world, and I'm going to change it based on whatever I did, based on the feedback. It's maybe, which is also hard. I think great leaders understand that maybe is okay. They don't always have the answers, and maybe is okay. And then the last thing is something that is super important. It's concerned with being real. I think it's so easy today to vet out people that are not real. We have so many things, and it's someone that is real is so much more valuable for me than being right. So I'd rather have you be real and give a part of yourself as a leader than just trying to be right all the time. So that being said, this is the last slide. I show this a lot, and because I really do believe it's about the questions, if you haven't figured that out. It really is about the questions, and I don't think, that being said, you might not always have the answers, but if you have a question and you live those questions, life will move you into the answers. And this last video was from this morning, and you guys probably know where it is. And that's pretty much it. So if you guys have any questions, or if you have any questions, just können wir gerne machen. Vielen Dank erstmal. Viel Spaß. So I just put this in there. I haven't even seen it to the end. Okay, yeah. Okay, there. Yeah. Cool. Fragen?
Hello. Does that work?
Yep. I can hear
Okay,
it.
that
Cool.
was a bit strange.
Yeah,
So you
it is
mentioned
strange.
ambiguity. How do you deal with ambiguity when you make decisions? So why is maybe okay?
I think when you have a yes or no situation, it's almost like it's binary. I mean, we can talk because you were in my workshop. It's binary. Binary means it's a 1 or 0. It's a on or off. And I think a lot of times when we say yes or no, it's almost like having a viewpoint of black or white. It's either this or this. And I think ambiguity is important because we don't really know what's coming down the line. So I think it's important to place your bets and be open to something new instead of just saying yes or no right away. Hopefully that kind of answered your question, but cool.
I have the feeling that people often feel uncomfortable with ambiguity and with not getting, the woo. Yeah. How would you tackle these problems? These situations?
I agree. I mean, I think we all are, we all like to know what's going to happen. We don't like to be unsure about things, and that's why insurance is so popular over here, right? I mean, insurance is there because you want to take risks, but you want to be sure that you're not going to nothing bad's going to happen. That's why big companies use companies like McKinsey and Accenture, because that means if we hire these guys, and something goes wrong, then we can blame these guys. It's these guys' fault. So I think ambiguity, how can you get used to it? I think you have to pull yourself out of comfortable situations. So we all have, there's this chart I use and that you've probably seen, and it's 2 circles. One is, this is your comfort zone here, it's really big, and then one is really small, this is where the magic happens. And I think the thing with the comfort zone is, it's great and we like it, but all the cool stuff is going to happen here, and all the cool stuff happens with ambiguity. Ambiguity for me is also risk. Think about all the stuff that would not have been done if nobody has taken the risk to do it. Flying, driving cars, starting a conference, in the middle of Graz, whatever it might be. And I think that's why ambiguity is so important. But as people, as humans, to get used to this idea of ambiguity is you have to put yourself in situations on a day-to-day level where you don't really know. So move out of your routine. And that doesn't mean you have to go skydiving or you have to go live the Red Bull lifestyle every day. But what that means is basically, if you go to work every day, take the bus or train or whatever, instead of always taking the same way to work, just take a different way to work. That's a little bit ambiguous. It sounds small, but it just changes your perspective. And I think that's where you start. And then when you can do that, do one thing that is a little bit risky or ambiguous every day, then that will change the way you think also in the business context. Thanks.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hello.
It's already my 3rd time when I see you on the stage, and every time it's great. So my question is about leadership. Can you give a few tips how to become a better leader?
I mean, it's basically, number one, becoming a leader is really about following your passion. And I think a lot of times, even people at Google, I think people love the Google lifestyle, which is free food and colorful rooms and all that stuff. But sometimes people don't really like working there. Just because it's like, it depends on what you're doing. So I think be true to yourself, number 2. And if you can be true to yourself, follow your passion. And then if you share your passion, that's really hard, I think, and that we don't see enough of. Share more of yourself. You have to sacrifice more of yourself. And empathy is really about sacrifice. It's about sharing, things that you typically don't share. Because if you can do that, that makes you a little more human. And I think people really connect to the human side of other people. So if I was to summarize it, 1, be authentic. 2, be passionate about what you do. Those kind of go together. 3, inspire. So if you are passionate about something, whether it's fishing or golfing or speaking or whatever it might be, drawing or designing, share that with other people. And then people will see you as a leader. And then obviously the hard thing is putting yourself out there. And you can put yourself out there in the context of, I don't know, like Casey Neistat, make videos, a vlog. You can write things. If you're a coder, you can throw stuff up on GitHub. If you're, people have opinions. And I think it's important to share that, because the more you share, the more you get back eventually. And you see that with companies like Linux, the open source, or like Google. It's really about sharing to some degree, and then that's why the community is so big.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hi. As a creative leader, how do you deal with staff that are accustomed to only authoritative leadership, the ones that need specific guidelines and control, and they're actually afraid of the carrot, they're only used to the stick, they are afraid of critical thinking, they just don't walk on their own because even from the education system, their families, it's just the culture is so ingrained about this authoritative leadership. How do you get these people
out of their...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's really about of Deutsch Umfeld. It's about the environment that you make. And if it feels like it's a place where you cannot really play, not in the sense of, we have beanbags and stuff, which would be okay, but how can you create an environment where people feel like they can try to be themselves and be a little bit more risky, putting themselves out there? I think people are generally, not everybody is creative, but we all are as children, but the institutions kind of take it out of us. We grow out of it. But if you think about where you work, it's really, most places are not places where you can play, in the sense that play for me means try things out without having the idea or the feeling that someone's going to say, oh, there you go again, trying stuff out, get back to work, we got to just finish this, whatever we're doing. So for number 1, it's creating an environment where they feel safe, a safe place to try things out. 2, accepting them as they are, which is not always easy. A lot of people are just seen as a number to help figure something out. And 3, it's really just creating small steps. So if people are scared or whatever it might be, let's say you're scared of heights, you gotta wean yourself off of that by doing little things every day. So I think the number 1 thing would be create a environment where they feel safe, where they can try things out. Because a lot of times people talk about it, the workplace culture, but it's not really a place where they can try things out. And that has like 100% to do with culture, Also, when, I don't know if some of you are students, but it's also when you, as students, the more important than working at a company is who your next boss is. So when you interview somewhere, interview who you're going to work with. Like they're going to be, your next partner, because it's so critical, that first job you get, that if that boss is, very polarizing in a way, or it's good in a way, that's gonna really ingrain you for the rest of your work experience. So don't think about, oh yeah, I want to work at Google just because it might be a cool company. Think about first, who is my direct boss? What kind of style is that person? Because that is more important than the brand you work for. Thanks. I think we're good. Thank you. Let's enjoy the evening. Yeah? Ciao.